when my dad passed away, it was kind of hard for me because, you know, eh, when he passed, we hadn't spoken in over 10 years. And, even at that point, like, I wasn't ready to let him back into my life. And, I spent the day before the funeral just like, I couldn't eat because I was so scared that people were gonna get on me. Because I hadn't spoken to him in 10 years and now I'm at his funeral and, like, how dare.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives, in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to today's episode today. I've already kind of started the little conversation here with Farin. Yay,
Hi.
Farin. And tell me again, because Schlussel, am I saying it right this
Yes,
time?
you got it right.
Yay.
Well
Yay, Farin
done.
Schlussel, yay. So we were already talking, and I'm like, no, hold on. Let me just do the formal introduction and let's start recording. And that way I get to know you as we're recording. So Farin and I have never met. We've only chatted through email.
Mm-hmm.
And she is the assistant director of marketing for Avery Books and TarcherPerigee,
Yes,
which I needed. Did I pronounce that one
you
right too?
did.
Yay! So, so she and I have been in communications just because she had asked me regarding a book that we were promoting for one of the people in that you guys, one of the books you released. So that's how
Mm-hmm.
our conversation started, and she happens to have a grief journey story as well. So that's what we will be talking about. But first, we're going to get to know each other as you guys will get to know her too. So welcome again, Farin.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is actually my first podcast ever, so I'm kind of excited, kind of nervous,
All good. This
but
is
I
the
trust
great.
you.
Oh yeah, well it's a good one to be in because honestly, I'm like so laid back, like so it doesn't. It's like there's no wrong or right in this podcast. So there's we just chat. So people are just eavesdropping in our conversation. That's the
Mm-hmm.
reality here. So tell us again then, where do you live right now?
So I live on Long Island in the suburbs of New York. Um, and I've lived here, I mean, not in my current place, but on Long Island my entire life. Um, and my parents met in Brooklyn. And oh no, my dog is asking to go out.
Oh, it's okay. It's
Okay,
okay. Go,
I'm
go,
gonna
go.
go get
That's
her.
no problem.
All right.
So I was just telling Farron, my dog is also in the room here, and so we were both like, "Oh, we're gonna end up having to have, like if our dogs need to get out or things like that." So it's
Yeah.
life. So we're just kind of,
She's
and she'll
totally gonna
probably need
ask me to come back in.
to come back in. I know. I leave my door ajar in case, although today it kind of seems a little closed, in case she asks me to walk out. So no problem.
Yeah.
Just so you know, the mic again is rattling a little
Oh
bit
no. Okay,
on.
I'll hold it.
It's okay.
Okay.
So your parents met in Brooklyn.
Yes. My mother was born and raised there, and my father, who my grief story is about, emigrated from Israel when he was 10. My grandparents were Holocaust survivors. They moved there after the war, and then they moved here and landed in Brooklyn.
Oh, wow. So that
Yeah.
is the journey. Now, are you the only child? More than
No,
one?
I have
How many are
two
you?
sisters, so we're three girls.
3 girls. Okay.
Yeah.
And
And
then
I'm the eldest sibling.
and you what? You're
I'm
the
the
eldest?
eldest. Yeah.
Oh, okay, me too. I'm the eldest. I'm the eldest
Yay.
of 3 sisters and 1 brother. So I'm the
Huh.
eldest of 4. Yeah. I'm the eldest of 4, but yeah, we were three sisters.
Yeah.
So, and I say were because one of my sisters passed away. But so
Yes.
tell me then we were just starting to talk about like what you studied, but so
Yes.
now you are what you do now. So it's curious. Let's take that journey. So
Yes.
you
Oh,
studied
she's back. Hang on, the door
she's
might
back.
slam.
Go, go, go.
There we go.
Let's
Um,
like
So I went to college for theater and for history. I double majored at Queens College. Um, and had intended on becoming a stage actor. I love theater. I've always loved musicals. So that was my original goal. And when I was getting close to graduating, I had a Carol Burnett plan. Carol Burnett's very famous plan was like she's going to give herself 5 years to make it. And then if it doesn't happen, she'll rethink things. So that's sort of what I did. I
I
was
never
like,
knew that story. I never knew
yeah,
that. And
yeah,
did she and she did make it for
and she
sure.
made it. And I think she was like it was like almost the end of her time and she made it. But I started auditioning for theater roles in the city, um, probably in my senior year of college. And it was really challenging. I wanted to join the actors union, so I was trying to like audition for shows that were associated with the actors union. Um, and the auditions were always very full, very competitive, which you're prepared for if you're a theater student or an acting student.
Mhm.
um but as I continued to go through it, and more and more people were graduating, it was becoming harder and harder to get into an audition room because people were getting to the audition, fellow the actors union is actors equity. And so like all the non actors equity auditionees like me were getting to auditions at like 2-3 in the morning
Mm.
to like start a sort of unofficial list to like get seen in the room. um
Because
and
there were only auditions technically that they wanted to audition equity actors, but sometimes the
yes,
non-equity actors would try to get a
yes,
shot at doing it. Okay.
yes, exactly. And like depending on how many people were supposed to be seen that day, you might get into the room. Oh,
There she goes.
sorry.
What's your
Now,
dog's name?
now a Penny. She's jumping.
And
She wants to sit in my lap. So hang on. It's gonna bonk again while I pull
Mommy
her
is
in here.
talking to us.
Yeah, she wants to be with me and she doesn't. She's
I
yeah, no, she
her
is
terms.
very sweet. She's a little um Cavalier King Charles Spaniel
Oh,
Chihuahua
beautiful.
mix. She's very cuddly.
Cute.
She's very cute. But yeah, so I was doing this for about 5 years, and I'd gotten seen for a lot. I'd gotten a bunch of callbacks. I hadn't successfully ever booked anything. I was working doing theater merchandise at night because it was good for my audition schedule. But I got to a point where I was just like, my friends were getting steady jobs, and I was hardly ever seeing them. My work was not so steady. I had no insurance. um and I got to a point where I was just I couldn't afford voice lessons, I couldn't afford acting classes. um so I got to a point where I was just like, you know what, like I only get to sing or act for like the 30 seconds I'm in an audition room. And I hustle and hustle and I don't see the people I love. And I was just like, I this is the end of it for me. I've kind of had enough. So I reevaluated what I wanted to do with my life, which is a really scary thing to do
And
when
this is how many years down
this
your
was
after you
it
had
was
graduated?
it was like at the 5-year mark, honestly.
Oh,
Carol
exactly
Burnett is
the
smart.
okay. So at that
um
moment is when you just made that choice. I think it depends on the type of career too, right? As
yeah,
to what it is, because like for example, as an entrepreneur, like when I used to own a business, like 5 years is when you're not even breaking. You
yeah,
start maybe making money after the 5 year mark, so you
yeah,
definitely have to stick on stick with it longer.
yeah,
But theater, which I was just telling you right before we started recording, that was my major as well, is a different ball game. You don't
yes.
you you could yeah, it's just different.
Yeah. And I mean,
It's
the
just
other
different
thing
when
is
you're
it's
acting.
it's not even necessarily about how good you are, It's
Mhm.
you look right on a certain day in a certain light. Like there are so many actors out there who'll be like, no, you go in and like, you make the casting director think that you're the one they wanted.
Mhm.
And I think that does happen, but I feel like most of the time it's like, they have a certain, they have something in their head, and if you're not it, they're not going to necessarily change their mind so quickly.
Mhm.
Um, but either way, I prefer,
Reevaluated.
yeah, and like I
Yeah.
prefer to work at things where I'm going to see some sort of reward.
Yes.
I don't need to be told that I'm amazing all the time, but I do like to get some sort of recognition for the hard
Feedback.
work that I
Yeah.
do.
Absolutely.
So I reevaluated and I was just like, well, what can I do with the rest of my life that isn't going to make me regret every second that I'm not performing, basically.
Mm.
Um, and I have been a lifelong reader, as much as I was a lifelong musical theater baby. Um, and so that was when I was like, oh, maybe I can work with books somehow. And that sort of led me down the publishing rabbit hole. Um, and, like a lot of people, I started thinking that I wanted to be a book editor, not, completely realizing that being a book editor doesn't just mean you read books all day long.
Mhm.
It's a very, very, um, the editors that I work with at my job are some of the smartest people I know, honest to God. Um, and I admire.
Is that intimidating? Is that intimidating, or, how is it like to work
It's
around people
It's
that you're like,
awesome.
"Whoa." I love it.
It's yeah, I mean, they're
It
just
stretches you, right? It
I
stretches you when
it
you yeah.
stretches you, and, like, they come with projects and you're just like, "Oh, man, like, A, how did you even think to, like, acquire this or, like, find this?" And, like, "I can't wait to work on this. This is gonna be amazing."
Mhm.
Um, and like the book that we worked on together with Rabbi Steve Leader, like, that was a situation where, like, the editor has done quite a few similar books, and like we had um in our job, sometimes like the editor meets with the author and their agent, alone, or sometimes they bring in the publicity and marketing team, just depending on the situation. And so I was lucky I got to be in this first meeting with Rabbi Leader. And
He's amazing. Yeah, he's
oh my
amazing to
god, well,
so you got to feel the energy too,
yep, and we
you
all just
did it
cried.
click yeah, did it click for you too, also coming from similar also religious backgrounds? Was that also something that it ended up, like, connecting to the story even more for you too?
For sure.
Yeah, it
And
did have a
like
big
we
impact.
ended up having like a sort of he speaks in the book about how, like, um
I read the
when
whole thing, so you could
yes,
tell
so
yeah.
like, when a family comes to him and he's like, talking them through like what life was like with their family member, so that way, A, they get closure, and B, he can pull material for a eulogy.
Yes, and I
He's
love that yeah, and because he
right?
doesn't just say yeah, because he doesn't just say, like, "Tell me all the good things," like, tell
Yes.
me also the things that were not that
Yes. So we were
awesome too.
talking about that in the meeting, and I was like, that part of the proposal really resonated with me because, when my dad passed away, it was kind of hard for me because, you know, eh, when he passed, we hadn't spoken in over 10 years. And, even at that point, like, I wasn't ready to let him back into my life.
Mhm,
And, I spent the day before the funeral just like I couldn't eat because I was so scared that people were gonna get on me.
mhm,
Because I hadn't spoken to him in 10 years and now I'm at his funeral and, like, how dare.
mhm,
But there were things that happened, when my parents separated, that were just really hard for me to look past, and I knew that for the sake of my mental health, um, I needed to sort of make that break, and I spoke about that with Rabbi Leader in the meeting. I was just like, I really appreciate that you're like, when you have these conversations, it's not all like, oh, what was good, let's only remember the good things about this person. And I think he knew where I was coming from because his father was also difficult.
Mhm.
Um, and he talks about that extensively in the book too. And I was just like, I really, really appreciated that. And then he just sort of started asking me some of the questions that he asks his congregants. And, we started a sort of conversation. And
Oh
like we
my
couldn't
gosh,
get
and this is how long had it been since your dad had died when he's
um
asking you these things?
I
Because it was
wanna
like a little therapy session
I
then.
know. I wanna say it was probably 3.5 years at that point.
Uh-huh.
My dad will have been gone for 5 years on
Mhm.
February 16th. So I'm
Okay,
actually coming up to the
as we're
anniversary.
recording that, yeah,
Yeah.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, so, I
So when he
started
asked
a
you the question, yeah, what
no,
did you say?
yeah. So I mean, it was I don't remember completely, and like we had to stop because obviously there were other people in the room. But like I remember, he left and we signed the book really quickly and we were all so excited because we loved him. We knew that it was going to be really special. Um and we sort of all reconnected over email after everything had been made official, and he's like, "How are you doing? Our conversation was kind of heavy." And I'm just like, I really appreciated
Amazing.
having it.
Yeah. Because that's the thing. Those are the conversations that a lot of people are not willing to step into. So
Yes.
being in spaces in which somebody actually is willing to go there with you, um, is necessary, and
Yeah.
especially in this dynamic in which, and this is where, is it okay we pivot at this moment
Sure.
and kind of go into that? So especially in the dynamic in which you had to go through, like, how do people ask you then the component of like, how are you doing, or I'm sorry for your loss, and those
Mhm.
kind of things, when it's somebody that has not been in your life for 10 years, and so, or that so
Yeah.
that you had distance yourself. So what were, first off, what were the circumstances surrounding your dad's death? Was it sudden? Was it gradual? Was it a
Um
illness, or was it sudden?
It was very sudden, actually, and it's something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. I was actually dead asleep. Like I'm an early to bed person because I have to get up pretty early. At the time, I was commuting, so I had been asleep for a couple of hours. But I always leave my phone on and plugged in on my desk. It's my alarm in the morning. I
Mhm,
can usually sleep through text notifications, whatnot. Um, but I was woken up because my phone was actually ringing. I thought it was my alarm, but in fact, it was ringing. And I pick it up, and it's my youngest sister on the phone, and she's in tears. And she said, "Daddy's dead." And I was just
mhm,
like, I thought it was a joke for a second. And she was like, "I just talked to him this morning, and my aunt called her up and told her that he had passed. He apparently had had a heart attack. He was living with my grandfather in Florida at the time. Um, and that's all I know. I know that he had a heart attack, and they tried to get him back, but it was too late, and he was gone. He had heart problems, when I was growing up, and he'd had at least one heart attack that I remember from my childhood. Um, but yeah, he was only 63.
sorry.
None of us had expected it. So he passed in Florida. And because we're Jewish, he needs to get buried as quickly as possible. That's the custom. So
Mhm,
my middle sister actually lives in Florida as well. So she saw the body off um, from the airport. And then they flew it up to New York, and we had the funeral the next day.
okay, so you were
So
able to have it in New York even though
yes,
his
because
dad
that's
died.
where the burial plot is,
Mhm,
and that's where most of the family still is. Like, my aunt lives in New Jersey. Um, some of our far-flung cousins live here, um,
mhm,
and that's where the family grew up. So, yeah, it was kind of traumatic almost, just because we found out so quickly, and then you know um 2 seconds later a funeral was happening, and it was like I hadn't even processed it yet. um and yeah, it wasn't until, like, I watched them lower the coffin into the ground, and they started like,
That it hit you. Oh,
burying
wow.
it, that it hit. Um,
How
but
so how was it for you? You were in contact with your mom and your sisters that you did have
yes,
a relationship with. They you had a relationship with them. Did your sisters have a relationship with your dad?
they did.
They did. Okay.
Yes, and that was
So,
their choice.
mhm.
My middle sister, I think might have stepped away a little, but my youngest sister always had a very close relationship with my dad.
So then you're here, you're seeing, his coffin go down.
Hmm.
Like, what are the emotions that go through when you have not, like, oh my gosh, like, and again, like even going with, rabbi leaders, book too,
Hang on,
like,
she's
because
back.
you actually, Penny.
Penny, she interrupts the very serious parts of the conversation.
Well, she's our icebreaker, right?
Yes,
She
she
just
is.
like, okay, let's just break. This is getting too deep.
Yes.
Let me ask
She's like,
mommy
"Let
to
me
open
sit
the
with you,
door.
mom. Let me
Yeah,
sniff
let
into
me.
the microphone." Okay, you were saying.
Yeah. So how do you deal with the
Hmm.
emotional component then of grieving somebody you did not have a relationship in that moment with? Of course, this is your father.
Hmm.
So regardless of the dynamics of what was happening in that moment, there's still things from the past, memories,
Hmm.
so forth. So tell us a little bit of that duality of grieving, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, an
Um,
absent, yeah,
so I mean,
father
you
in
sort
other
of
words.
hit the nail on the head with it in that, like, it was my dad,
Mhm,
and he was now gone, and I was one parent less on this earth, and I was barely 32. Like I wasn't going to turn 32 until May that year. So like I'd lost him pretty young,
mhm,
and I never expected that. Like it was a new year, my vocabulary did not include my dad died. Um so that loss, I felt it acutely even though I hadn't spoken to him in a very long time. Um, at the same time, you're dealing with the fact that because you were estranged and didn't really have much of a relationship anymore, again, it was like I was mentioning earlier, like, you're worried that people are going to come at you and be like, who the hell are you? Like, you didn't
mhm.
speak to him for X amount of time. You have no right to this.
Like, you have no right to any, like, even for your emotions, or no right to even be here, no right for
Yes.
even things that are in the will, those kind of things, like those no right type of things.
Yes,
Mhm,
all of that.
mhm,
And like,
mhm,
the first interaction with my aunt and my grandfather at the funeral was painfully awkward. Um and they sort of thanked me like a stranger, which is, like honestly to be expected, but at the same time it's like, um regardless of what relationship I had with him, I was still grieving the loss. So,
absolutely,
yeah. It was
absolutely.
it was challenging, and then, but it was also something that I worked through because in Judaism, when you lose a parent, you mourn for an entire 11 months,
Mhm.
practically a year.
Yeah,
And
that you
in
can't do any of the major, like the is that correct? Some of the celebrations you can't have. And
yes.
that's actually, and that's something I didn't get to touch upon in the interview with Rabbi Leader
Mhm.
regarding the actual beauty behind that, because it gives you permission
Yes.
to say no to things
Yes.
when you don't feel like going to a celebration or going.
Yes.
It gives you permission because it's part of your
Mhm.
ritual of your of
Yeah.
not participating in events during those 11 months.
Yeah. And I think was the most powerful tool in the grieving process for me, um, was this custom that's built into my religion. And, people will do it to varying degrees, but I was pretty strict about it. Like, two of my best friends were getting married about a month after my father passed, and I had to call them and tell them, I can't come to your wedding anymore. And that ripped my heart out. But at the same time, like, it means that you can't just be like, okay, it's over. He's buried. I'm going to, like, go back to life now as it was. And, that's it. Like the fact that you have to sit with the loss for that amount of time, you really and truly process what's happened to you. Uh-oh, she's gonna sorry, she's gonna bark because the my downstairs neighbor just slammed the downstairs door, so she has to tell me all about it. Okay, go,
A
go, go,
conversation.
go yell at them. Good girl. Um, but
Aren't they amazing, by the way? Sorry, aren't they like how old is she? How old
she's
is Penny?
4.
Oh, so you've had her less time than your than the
Well,
but hasn't she been essential in this process for
so
you
I
too?
actually so I had a dog before her.
Mm.
My I had him for a very long time. He passed away in 2019, and I'd had him for 12 years.
Oh,
So
good for
he was with me um
Okay.
when I found out about my dad, and he basically didn't leave my side until I so we after, in Judaism, after you've buried your loved one, the family does something called Shiva. They sit for 7 days. Um, and people come and visit and basically take care of you, like they bring you food, they talk to you, they comfort you. Um, and so we sat Shiva in my youngest sister's apartment in Brooklyn, so he couldn't come with me.
Mhm.
And that was really, really hard. Like I left him at his boarding place and I was just a sobbing mess. I was like, I've been, cuddling and using him as my comfort for the last 24 hours, and the fact that I'm not going to see him for the next 7 days is
So
really
hard,
hard.
yeah.
Um but he was definitely a comfort that entire year. Um and you know my little girl is the best comfort now in this really just horrific kind of time. Like she's
Different, yeah,
yeah
with
I
the with the
she's
sales of did you so how long have you had Penny then? Because if
um
your first dog, how you said 2019,
yes, and he was
so did you already
14.
have he was 14. Did you already have Penny or did you get Penny
No, I
afterwards?
got Penny after. So he did not get along very well with other dogs. He was very much like the house had to be a one human kind of house. But the very best boy, and I wouldn't change anything about him.
Mhm,
So he passed away, and I was honestly ready to adopt again right away. Um,
mhm.
but I was going on a trip, and I didn't want to bring a new dog into my home and then have to leave them behind while I go away for a week. So I was like, let me just wait until I get back. Um, and I was in touch with the rescue that I'd gotten my previous dog from, to let them know that he had passed, and that I would definitely be interested in, rescuing another dog. And a couple of days after I got back, um, I called to let them know that I was back and that, I was ready to start the process. If they had any dogs to meet, I'd love to meet them. And so my childhood dog and my heart dog were both cocker spaniels. So I really was hoping to
Mm,
get another
interesting.
cocker spaniel.
Which
Um,
which Penny is part because
Penny
she's
is
a
not
spa
a she. Yes, she's
oh,
a
she has
Cavalier.
yeah,
No, so she's a
part. Oh,
Cavalier King
has
Charles spaniel and a Chihuahua.
yeah,
So she's sort
yeah,
of
so
in the
they she has
family.
part. She has
Yes.
that King Charles.
But I honestly, so like, they didn't have very many cocker spaniels in the rescue at the time that were ready for adoption, and they're like, but we have this really sweet little mix. Would you be open to meeting her? And I was like, I will meet any dog. So we went and we met her, and the minute they brought her out, like, hold on, she's asking to come up yet again. Ugh. Can you stay here maybe? You're so silly. Um,
Mine's like so asleep right now. She's like laying on the bed,
I mean,
just
I
zonked.
I
Mine's
think that
like
she keeps
zonked right
coming
now.
up because I have my attention on you and not on
Yeah,
her.
yeah, she's like,
She's,
me, me.
Um,
Has it been, like, amazing? So you see her come out, they bring her
They
out,
bring
and
her
then you
out
see her.
and they, so they put her in my arms. She's very small. She's only 13 pounds and my previous dog was 30. So that was a that was a difference.
Yeah.
But like she came into my arms and she started giving me kisses right away and she was so sweet and just so tiny and I was just like just put away the foster to adopt papers and give me the adoption papers.
Oh, you love
And we brought her home that day, and she has been the most wonderful little bundle. She absolutely helped heal my heart from
Mhm.
that loss, which was earth-shatteringly devastating. In a way that
What was
losing a human is
your
not.
dog's name? Yeah, what was your dog's name that
Hershey.
passed? Hershey.
Yeah.
So that is one thing too that people sometimes don't, especially people that don't have pets, don't
Yeah.
necessarily understand. And it's, the bond that there is,
Yeah.
and that just as much as you can grieve the death of somebody in your life that's a
Yes.
human, you can also grieve the death of a dog. But also the aspect then of this healing. So Hershey was
Yes.
there for you when you're healing and in your journey
Yes.
of, with grief with your dad's passing, and then
Yes.
now Penny's in your life helping you grieve,
Yes.
in your grieving journey of Hershey's passing. So what a
Yes.
beautiful cycle.
Yes.
So let's go back then again to then your dad and then the funeral and
Mhm.
the aspects and the tools. You mentioned then holding Shiva, doing the 11 months. What is the 11-month period called in Judaism that when
Um,
you when you
so I
mourn?
I don't think it has a formal
What's that name?
name.
Okay.
So Shiva is the first 7
7 days.
days. Then you have what's called the Shloshim, which is the first 30 days. So
Okay.
that's, in combination with the Shiva. So the Shiva is the most severe mourning. Um, when you're sitting, you're not really supposed to shower. You're supposed to wear the same clothes when you go to the burial. The rabbi will make a cut in your clothing for you to tear, so you wear that torn shirt every day that you're sitting. um you're not supposed to cut your nails. Like, it's basically, it's a physical outward manifestation of your grief. Like, it's so all consuming that you can't take care of yourself. There's a little leeway, of course, like, for the Sabbath, which, Shiva ultimately runs into. Yes, take a shower.
Mhm.
For some, like, not showering is not an option. Obviously
And
change.
especially if you're like in Shiva with a lot of
Yes.
people, I could imagine that at some
Yes.
point you'd be like, maybe,
Wait.
Uncle Tom, would you
Yes.
mind maybe stop observing?
Well, I'm like, obviously change your undergarments every single day, please. It's not to make you sick. But
Yeah, it's
you
just
know,
it's just in order to respect giving you that space
yes.
that if by chance you really do not feel like
Yeah.
in that moment in your grief to take care
Yes.
of yourself
Yes.
outwardly.
Yes.
It's just
And
like giving you permission. It's the
yeah,
giving permission
you
period
you can
of
fall apart.
feel
You're
whatever you
expected
wanna
to.
feel right now. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's that, yeah, it doesn't mean that if you by chance shower, it's something that
Yeah,
is
no.
not
Yeah,
necessarily okay. It's just
absolutely.
that you're given permission to not have
Yes.
to do those things. Just like you're given permission not to cook, you're
Yep.
given so that others can bring it to you,
Yep.
take care of you, because to some extent, for some people, their grief may be so great,
Yes.
so grand that they can't physically do it.
Yes.
So it's that permission.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. So those are that's the most severe part of the mourning. The 30
mhm,
days, is somewhat of an extension. Like, you're, again, not supposed to cut your hair. Um, Men are advised, like, not to shave their beard. Um, but, you're not wearing your Shiva clothes anymore. You've come back to life, slowly but surely. Like, you're going back to work and things like that. Um, and then after the 30 days are over, that's when you go into your, the rest of your 11 months of mourning.
mhm,
Um, and again, it doesn't have a formal name as far as I know, but the person who's mourning is, is called an avel in Hebrew, which means a mourner. So that 11 months is avelus, which is, mourning. Um,
Okay.
and during those 11 months, you light a memorial candle. And my sister and I both got these like big 7-day candles. But they also come in like 3-day and then like the little 1-day ones that you see in the supermarket at Rosh Hashanah and stuff like that.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so we lit a candle every week in memory of my dad, for that entire 11 months. Um, and then, throughout those 11 months, like we sort of touched on, you don't do anything sort of celebratory. So that's no parties, no weddings, no live theater or concerts, no movies, no big festive large gatherings, basically nothing that's going to take you out of, you know, this
Dealing with
state
your
of
feelings.
mourning so that you don't,
Mm,
yes, exactly, so that, you feel your feelings,
mhm,
and really and truly come to terms with the enormity of the loss in front of you. Um, and, some still do go to things like, they'll go to a wedding, but like, you don't dance or you help serve or something like that. Like, there are ways, like if you feel really strongly about being involved in someone's celebration without celebrating yourself, you can. Um,
mhm.
but, you know, that's sort of the way that the 11 months are structured.
And so for you, you really observed it very strictly. Now, so
Yes.
what how so for example, the 2 friends that you weren't able to go to you chose, let me just put it that way, you chose
Hmm.
not to go to their wedding because you
Hmm.
were following then your mourning period. Then
Yes.
how, for example, did they react? How did others react in that process of you following so strictly, your grieving process? I'm just again curious because I'm sure that that component must have also played a part in your your whole dynamic again with your dad too, right? With the estrangement as you're
Yeah.
grieving him and then people like being surprised. So how was that dynamic?
This is actually I'm already starting to cry. Um,
It's okay.
my friends are the best people in the world.
Mm.
When I called my friends to tell them that I couldn't come to their wedding, hold on, dog is reacting again.
Be she's reacting because she's feeling your emotions.
Yeah.
She's feeling your
So
emotions.
when I told them
Mhm,
that I couldn't come to their wedding, they told me not even to worry about it. They said that they would miss having me there, but that obviously this was a situation that, didn't even warrant like an, how could you kind of reaction.
that's beautiful.
Or a like, can you come but not dance kind of reaction. They were just
Mm,
like, we'll miss you, but you you're going through something really terrible. Um, and then sorry. Whew.
no, 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 do not even.
Um, the entire time that I was mourning, they just stepped up. And Rabbi Leader talks about this in the book, like, when people ask, like, what can I do for my friend who, has
Mhm.
lost somebody? Stepping up is the best possible thing you can do. And I am absolutely wholeheartedly agree with that. They curbed their lives basically to, help me sort of not be alone.
Mm,
And that's a debt that I hope that I can repay someday when they go through something horrible, hopefully not a death, but
mhm.
it meant the world to me that, they kept gathering small, that, we hung out a lot in somebody's kitchen, just 4 or 5 of us, doing a puzzle or playing games or, you know, watching TV and having dinner together at home. Like they did that for 11 months for me.
That's
Um
beautiful.
so I would have fallen apart without them. Well and truly, they saved my life.
So they were one of your biggest tools then in your grieving process.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
the aspect of having them, one, be understanding, two, be so accommodating, and even adapting what they would have normally done socially in order to make sure to include you in ways that you could be included. Like, instead of going, hey, we're gonna go out to a movie tonight, they'd be like, okay, no, let's all hang out and play board games at Farron's house, or let's go to so and so's house and just all hang out, accommodating to what you were able to participate in during those 11 months. Um, so would you say they were one of your biggest kind of pillars in this
Absolutely.
journey? Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Did
Um,
you,
and
yeah, like
I'm
how
yeah.
do you know them, by the way? Your friends, are they childhood friends? Are they
Um,
more your college
so
friends? What
there
is the
so this
dynamic, the
particular
variety?
group are people that I met in college, for the
Mhm.
most part. And we've been friends for over 20 years,
Mhm.
which is kind of insane, or like close to 20 years. Um, and like a lot of them have actually known each other since high school. I was one of the last people to sort of be inducted into this group, for lack of a better word.
Mhm.
Um, and again, I'm incredibly fortunate. They are some of the most wonderful, caring people that I know. And, if it were someone else in the group, we would all do the same. It's how we are together. We just value each other very much. Um, so, yeah. And luckily now we all live pretty near each other. So, there's a real support system there. So
Mm.
they really helped me get through. Um, like I said, if they hadn't been there, I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah, that is so amazing. Now, what other tools did you have to go, let's say, to therapy or things like that in order to kind of address and you can answer this or not, by the way,
Mhm.
any question I ask, if there's anything that I'm kind of going out of bounds of asking, or if you
Mhm.
don't feel comfortable answering, please don't, don't, please say
Sure.
pass. Um, but would, yeah, in order to be able to deal with that dynamic again of
Mhm.
the component of, I don't know if there were a lot of feelings of guilt or things like
Mhm.
that because of having been estranged from your dad. Did you have to go to any of that, or did you deal with it mainly with yourself?
So I dealt with it mainly myself. And I talked about it with my youngest sister. She's the other thing that really got me through everything. Um, because she lived so close by. We made an effort to see each other as much as we could during those 11 months. And I had a young nephew at the time. So we would get together, I would play with my nephew, we would talk about um how we were doing and what we were feeling at that particular moment in time. um so that definitely helped, because we had a mostly shared experience in this
Mhm.
case. um but I used those 11 months to just sort of sit with everything. um, and it helped me come to terms with two things. The first thing is that I don't regret what I did, or my choice, I should say. Um, like I said, it was the best thing for me. Um, and I still believe that. And, if he was still alive, would that be different? Would I maybe be open to reconciling now? Who can say? I honestly don't know. Um, but I had time to sort of sit with that and really be honest with myself of whether I regretted it or not, and I didn't. um and there were relatives who would say to me over the years, you're going to regret it if you don't patch things up, but I honestly don't.
Mhm.
He was a great dad to me growing up. But there came a point where he just changed from the dad that I knew growing up, and I
Mhm.
couldn't be around that. So,
You have to protect yourself, and you're not the
Exactly.
first person I know that has had to do that as an adult,
Mhm.
and that dynamic of your relationship, with your parent that has changed, and choosing to do so is actually more of an act of love, actually for
Mhm.
yourself too, and for your own well-being
Yeah.
dynamic.
Yeah. So that's
So,
the
yeah, go
first
ahead.
thing, and then the second thing that I learned sitting in my grief is that I had a right to it.
Mm,
Regardless of what my relationship was with my father and regardless of what other people thought based on that, the fact was I had a loss. And it's a loss no matter what. Um and you know, I can grieve that loss no matter what people think. So,
mhm.
yeah.
So wise. That is so wise. And that wisdom came from you allowing to also just, again, sit with your grief. Because if you had just gotten back to the busyness of life or so forth, you might
Mhm.
still be 5 years later, still wondering the what ifs and the what ifs. But because you
Yeah.
allowed yourself to feel and sit and analyze and, tear apart all the feeling, anything that you had
Yeah.
going on within your grief, that you were able to reconcile with these two major parts of these emotions.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Now, what are there in those 11 months, did you journal? Are you, since you said you read a lot,
Mhm.
did you read books on grief? Did you journal? Did you listen to podcasts? Did you, I don't know how many, I only discovered
Yeah.
podcasts probably in the last probably 5 years. But
Yeah.
so what were some other tools you used in that journey?
I started practicing yoga actually.
Oh, wonderful.
um, it was something that I kind of dabbled in. Had a not so great experience with it in high school. It was our phys ed teacher, with all the best intentions, brought in a yoga instructor to for like a few classes, but she spoke, in a way that high school students wouldn't necessarily process things.
Mhm,
And she was
mhm.
asking us to do things that were kind of hard for a high school student to do, like, empty your mind and focus and things like that.
Yeah.
Think about your chakras and things. And
Yeah.
I was like,
What is
yoga's
that?
not
Yeah.
for
Foreign
me.
yeah, foreign language is
I
like it
know. It's
make
like
it
if
like
she just got into the
relatable.
asanas and asanas are poses. I shouldn't speak like
Yeah, the
people
movements.
listening
Yeah,
know yoga. But if she had just gotten to that right away and like taken some of the more deep stuff out of it,
Mhm,
we might have been a little more receptive. But it was so but long story short, I came out of that experience and I was like, I don't know if this is right.
mhm,
Um, and then, throughout as I was growing older, I would dabble in the poses here and there, for stretching basically. Um, but it was during those 11 months that I started, I found Yoga with Adriene on YouTube, like lots of other people.
mhm.
And I just, I was like, let's give this a try. Oh, sorry. She's panting right near the microphone right
Ex Everybody, it is not fair and
No,
planting right
it's
now.
my
It is
little
Penny.
dog.
It's Penny.
She's in my lap. She insists. Can we stop? No? Okay, sorry. You might hear her for the
No,
rest of the interview.
no worries, no.
So I said let's just give this a try. So I tried a video, and I really enjoyed it. I got really sweaty, which I didn't think you could do with yoga. So I started doing it on a more regular basis, and um just learning how to marry the poses with my breath. And you do a lot of breath work as a theater student, so it's something that
Mhm.
I already had a foundation in. So I think that helped me. That was a gateway too, because it wasn't so crazy for me at that point in my life to be like,
Into your diaphragm.
exactly. And doing alignment and stuff like that. So it was a blessing in disguise, I guess. I got into yoga in my 30s because I was ready for it basically.
That
Um
actually, you touched upon something interesting because that's the thing. A lot of times too, like one don't don't give up on something you might have not liked before. It's kind of like trying a
Yeah.
food one time and then maybe trying it later on. You might, you might like it then.
Mhm.
And same with experiences, because we grow so much and change so much.
Yeah.
And where we are in our life, we may be ready to receive that. So it's a great little learning thing that you're sharing with us here
Yes.
for all of us.
Yes.
So then that was one of the things. Then yoga.
Yep. And I started practicing regularly, and that definitely, it was another thing about, I guess just like centering yourself, in a time where you can feel really unmoored. Um, and, just sort of taking care by moving mostly gently. Although, there are yoga poses and practices that are really
Oh
hard.
yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And you need that too, like, just like physically sweating out, like, you know, whatever's bothering you today. Um, that
What
really
a good
helped.
mirror to life too, and what you were experiencing in that moment.
Yeah.
What it mirrored it beautifully, because it was basically, in some of these emotions, you're going to have to go through them gently.
Yep.
And these emotions of grief, like kind of just ease into them.
Mhm.
And some other ones, you might just have to like face them strong,
Yep.
like just go ahead and just hop on that head and do a headstand type of
Yep.
thing, like, or crow pose or
Yep.
whatever, one of those things, just, um, so that is, yeah, it mimicked what you were kind of going through
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. As far as like reading and journaling, so I didn't take up journaling. Um, it was something that I feel like, I'm not a regular journaler, although
Mm,
of course I have journaled. Um, but I feel like my emotions, like putting those emotions down on a page, was a little too raw, I guess.
mhm.
Like I have like a handful of journal entries from that time. Um, but it didn't feel like the right outlet necessarily for me in that place. Um, and as far as reading goes, I also don't think I was ready to read books about dealing with my grief.
Mhm,
And I think that that's something that a lot of people feel. Um, I think that there's definitely like a solid, like there's a camp of people who, like, when they experience a loss, they want to read more about it right away. And then there are others who, like, they need it to not be so immediate before they start reading more about it. And I was in that latter camp. So I did a lot of comfort reading. I went back to favorite books, or like, new books in my favorite genres. And I just sort of used those for like a momentary escape.
mhm. Like fiction, like more like fiction
Yeah,
type
like
of thing?
I when I want to read for pure fun, I like to read a lot of mystery thriller.
Mhm.
I also like historical fiction, and some contemporary fiction. I was doing a lot of that kind of reading at that time.
Mhm.
Um, and it was what I needed, in
Yeah.
between when you're reading manuscripts for work, which we do a lot.
And then you come into in that, it's been almost 5 years, and then
Yes.
you also then end up having to market
Yeah.
a book about grief.
Yes.
Now, in what does your grief look like now, almost
Mhm.
5 years later? What does it look like now?
So there's something else that Rabbi Leader says in the book that I think is 100% accurate, and it's that it comes in waves.
Mhm,
And that, sometimes, and I think you can probably relate to this with your own loss, is that sometimes, you feel normal. Um, it's always with you, but like it doesn't hurt so much today.
mhm,
Um, you're going on with life. And then, at some point suddenly, like it hits you, and that sadness comes back for a minute. Or like, on a particular day. Um, for me, that's always at the Jewish holidays when we say the memorial prayer Yizkor.
mhm,
We say that 3 times a year. And every time, like, I know that it's the day. like I inevitably feel sadder.
Mm.
Because I'm about
Is
to
it the
say,
anticipation? Like that
yeah,
anticipation of it, that's the day you're gonna say that prayer. Mhm.
yeah. And like, you say the Hebrew name of your loved one in that prayer. And there's something about, saying the prayer literally translates to remember the soul of my father, then you say your father's name or your mother, whomever has passed, who has
Mhm.
gone to, the next world, basically. So those words are very powerful words. So the anticipation that I'm going to say that and like, just sort of reaffirm my father is no longer in this world, those days are
Mhm.
always hard. Um, and then of course, the anniversary of the passing is always hard. Um, it.
How do you honor those days, like, either traditionally
Mhm.
in your Jewish faith or also just as a family,
Mhm.
like with
Um,
your sisters and stuff? How do
yeah,
you is there anything special you do
we always
on his
check in with each
anniversaries?
other on the anniversary day.
Mm.
Whether that's a grouped text or, actually getting on FaceTime, whatever we're sort of feeling or whatever we need that day. Um, and then, traditionally you light a memorial candle. And then, there are any number of like the idea is that you do some sort of good deed in that person's name that day, because it's, special. It honors, their spirit and, who they were in life. So what I like to do every year is I like to make a donation to my father's high school. Um,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, well,
Mhm.
because what he used to always tell us stories about how much he loved his experience in that high school. Like every Friday night, like, we would be sitting around after dinner and we would be like, "Tell us this story from school, Daddy." And he would, and like he had his old high school yearbook, and we would go through it, and he would like talk to us about his classmates or like what this photo means or something. So, I when like the first year celebration came around, I was like, well, what's meaningful? I don't want to just like give money to some random charity. Um, and I knew that his high school was, very important. So every year I donate in his memory to their funds.
The aspect of giving to something that's memorable or that's meaningful to the person that has passed, not only for us but for the person that's passed, that's so beautiful because you hear people giving, donating to, for example, if somebody died of cancer and
Mm-hmm.
certain different things like that, and then you give to those organizations, which is beautiful. But I had never heard of, for example, giving to the high school that they went to that brought so many fond memories to them and in their life. And I love that. I love that idea.
Yeah.
You've shared so many amazing ideas, Farron, of your journey, the tools that you use, the importance of creating your own support group,
Mm-hmm.
creating your own people, your own tribe to help you through this. Um, that just really understand you and the value of that and what that played in your life. Now, what would you say in this experience of grief has been something that either you've grown from or that you are grateful for having gone through something so hard? And again, I never, when I ask
Mm-hmm.
this question, I always have to have preface that it's never that we are saying that we're happy that this happened,
Yes.
but that we are grateful for the things that have come because of it. It's again, even
Mm-hmm.
going with the title of Rabbi Leaders, you know, book that we mentioned of the beauty of what remains. What
Mm-hmm.
is kind of like, again, what do you see now differently in life?
Um, so I guess, and I feel like this is probably going to sound a little cliche, but it's definitely something
Your
that
truth. It's your truth.
is
It doesn't
true,
it, yeah.
is that you're stronger than you think you are.
Hmm.
Because, like, this is one of the most horrific things that could happen to you in your whole life, you know? Um, Regardless of what your relationship is with the person, it's still a horrific thing. And, the fact that you get through it and you're still standing,
Mm,
like, what a what a thing. Like,
mm,
what a testament to ourselves and our humanity.
mm.
That we can go through something like this, and not just our humanity, our resilience,
Yes,
you
there is a
know?
and that just has shown even just this year. Well, I
Yeah.
say this year, now we're kind of going into it's almost going to be a year
Yeah.
since we've all been experiencing what's going on in the world with
Mhm.
the pandemic, but the resilience of the human spirit, it's just amazing. And the way in which people are so creative and
Mhm.
to, and all the creativity that's come. Um, the 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 going through something this strong, so hard to realize you're so strong, how has that then influenced other areas of your life of how you carry difficulties and challenges?
I mean, I don't know if it's had a direct influence on that, if I'm honest with you.
Uh-huh.
Like, I don't know if I necessarily go into situations and I'm like, I can handle anything because I made it through this horrible tragedy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's
Maybe not
but
consciously. Maybe it's
yeah, I
not
was
conscious.
gonna say
Maybe
maybe
it's
it's an unconscious thing where it's like, it's
different posture that occurs. Yeah.
yeah, or just like, like maybe it's just a general like attitude, I don't know. Or it's just like, yeah. That's a weirdly the hardest question for me to answer.
No, it's
I'm just like,
that
I
is
don't know. I
I know.
mean,
No, you know what? It's so true, though. I wouldn't know if I could
yeah.
answer that question either. I think it's because it's something we all go through hard things. I mean,
Yes.
every human being goes through struggles. Every human being goes through some type of loss in their life all the time. And we're constantly, again, just showing ourselves that we can get up, and keep going.
Yep.
And that we are, like, again, using that word resilience again, we are resilient. And it is a testament to the human spirit. It's just really how resilient we are,
Yeah.
and strong, like you said.
Yeah.
So you're right. Like, maybe it is not, maybe it's not that you don't have the right answer. It's just, maybe it's just not a good question. Maybe it was not a good question.
I don't know.
I just thought I'd ask. I'm like, oh, I wonder, like, how does this? But
Yeah.
by the way, because in my conversations, I don't plan anything out of any questions of anything that I'm going to ask. I
That's
just, whatever
good
pops
though. The
in my head,
conversation flows.
I'm like, whatever pops in my head, I just ask. So
Yeah.
sometimes the question may not be a good one. Like,
Yeah, I
maybe
don't
this
know.
one is.
I wish I could say, but I mean, yeah, and it's not like I mean, it's not even like one of those things where it's like, I live every day like it's my last cuz
Right,
I
right, right.
don't.
Yeah.
I
No,
mean,
and yeah, because well, the reality is it every day could be, right? But we
yes.
don't necessarily, yeah, take that, because if we did that too, like, how different would that be? With some
Exactly. It's
people
like
that
we'd
might
never
mean,
go to
oh,
work.
exactly. Let me just quit my job then,
Yeah.
because I don't
I'm
know
going
if
to go
it's my last.
travel the world. Who cares that it's a pandemic? This could be my last day.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some things that we do have to kind of restrict ourselves from doing and having that mindset.
Yeah.
Now, how else would you, or what else would you want to say to the listeners in terms of your grief journey, or any
Yeah.
words of wisdom?
I mean, I'll just come back to it again. Like, sit with it as much as you can, work through it, cry every single day. It doesn't matter. If that's what's helping you get through what just happened to you, um do it. You know? Um if you need to like bury it for a minute, fine, but you know, don't bury it away forever. Um And don't let anyone rush you out of it either. Like,
Mm.
just because someone else thinks it's time for you to move on doesn't mean it is. And, if you feel like I should be over this right now and you're not ready to be over it. The time will come. And just be patient, be kind to yourself. Um, and, there will be better days than this, basically.
Mm. Perfect way to end this conversation with those wise words. Thank you so much, Farin.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for being vulnerable and sharing something that is not easy. And
Yeah.
I'm just grateful for you to trusting the process here of our conversation.
Of course, and thank you for tolerating my very clingy dog, who I
Oh, no,
love.
it's fine.
She'll be so happy when I go back and sit with her.
Oh, well, thank you, Penny, for allowing Mommy to talk.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Farin.
Thank you.
Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.